The longer I've been in business, the more I try to simplify the strategies that we implement for clients. And in this podcast episode today, I'm going to talk about 3 things that we would add to a $1 million a year business to create instant growth. And this is based on the work that we do inside of Media Firestorm, our program. Probably in the last 6 months, we've had over 50 plus businesses that are doing anywhere from $1 million to $10 million plus a year that have come in and joined our process. And a lot of the time, we notice that there are similar problems and similar things happening in each of those businesses. There was really just a couple of tweaks and a couple of changes we're able to create massive growth. And I want to talk about those 3 key things today because this is massively important for you to understand, because being able to implement just even one of these 3 things can sometimes create upwards of a 2 or a 3x increase inside of the business. And if you end up installing all 3 of these things, the amount of growth that you can get is pretty stratospheric, and you can really start to make a big impact into that bottom line of your company. Now, if you're listening to this for the first time, welcome to the show. My name's Jamie Atkinson. We run a company called Media Firestorm. And this show and these podcasts and these YouTube shows are all about helping you figure out how to get to 100K months or tack on the next 100K month after that. And just to be really clear, we don't make any income claims or promises on this show. We got absolutely no idea who you are or what you do, if you even sell anything or if you're even capable of implementing. So no income claims here. It's really difficult for you to be able to actually even grow a business to $1 million a year. Less than 3% of businesses, according to a lot of varied sources online in the US, actually gets to that level. And so definitely getting to multiple 100K months is going to be significantly harder than that. So let's dive into these 3 things inside of this episode. Now, first of all, the very first thing that we install for almost every single client that comes in, and to be clear, we also had a lot of businesses, probably another 50 or 100 businesses doing less than $1 million a year that we worked with inside of Media Firestorm in the last 6 months. But for this video specifically, I want to focus on the $1 million plus businesses we worked with. The first thing is email marketing. Now, a lot of the time when we say email marketing, a lot of people get really butthurt or really confused, or they say things like, well, I've got a dead list, or I haven't been emailing my list. Oh, I can't email them, more frequently than what I am, even though I'm only emailing them once a month. There's a lot of bullshit that you guys tell yourselves about the way that email marketing works. So I just want to set the record straight for a couple of things really quickly. 1, there is no such thing as a dead list. My business partner, when me and her first joined and made this new business, she hadn't emailed her list in like 6 years. We're talking like 6,000 people that hadn't received even a single email really talking about what she's doing or what she's got going on inside of the business. And we went out there and we started just emailing that list every day immediately in the business. And those first couple of months, we added, I think, somewhere in the region of about $300,000 of sales, almost exclusively from this email list. And, before going in, she was of this adamant belief that that was a dead list. So first thing is, there is no such thing as a dead list. There is only a list of contacts that have not been contacted effectively. And so the first thing that we'll always get people to look at when they join this process is whether they have a deliverability problem. A lot of people, when they come in, they've got issues where they've actually got problems with their emails not being delivered. They're going into spam, or they're going into the promo tab, or something along the lines of that. And so it's really important that we make sure that you don't have a deliverability issue. But beyond that, a lot of the time you just haven't emailed these people. They just haven't heard from you, okay? And so the first thing you got to do is you got to market to the people that have opted in to hear from you in the first place. And so that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is we say to people all the time, you should be emailing daily. And we also have a lot of clients that email more than once a day. And a lot of people have a lot of resistance to that. They say, Jamie, oh my gosh, if I start emailing daily, aren't people going to hate me? Aren't people going to unsubscribe? Aren't people going to send me angry emails and poop in the mail for emailing them, having the audacity to send them an email every day? Yeah, you'll get people that get pissed off it, but we don't measure the success of the business by people that unsubscribe. It is a metric that literally does not matter. That would be like if you had an in-person store counting a metric of how many people looked in through the window but didn't walk through the front door. What would be the point in measuring a metric like that, right? What we want to measure instead is activities that lead to sales. And we also want to write emails in such a way that actually they invite people to want to stay on the list, and we write them in a way that gets them to want to buy. So the first thing we install for almost every new business, especially when they're doing $1 million plus, is emails every day. And these emails, we follow something we call the daily email matrix. We write 80-20 emails, which is 80% of some kind of story or value and 20% a very soft pitch. And when we say a soft pitch, we're not writing words and words and words on trying to get them interested to buy. We usually just have one very simple transition that gets them interested to kind of come through and actually become a customer. Now, if you're not on my email list and you've got no idea what the fuck I'm talking about when it comes to a soft transition, go join the free community that we've got. Go join our list. I'll put some links down in the description of this episode so you can go join our mailing list and really start to see what it is that I'm talking about here. But long story short, if you write something of value, 200, 250 words, which is either a story of something has happened, a lesson of something you've learned recently, or even just something that happened in your life. Your girlfriend ran to the store and spilled coffee over herself. Just write about something, and then in the final 20% of that email, we're going to transition into a soft pitch, right? Sometimes you wake up in the morning and you spill coffee, and that's okay. In your business, you might be finding that every day feels like spilled coffee because you're not getting enough leads coming in. If you know that's your case and you need more leads, you should maybe consider getting booked on podcasts. Click here to book a call. Doesn't matter what the transition is. You just need to put some kind of soft pitch in every email. Now, here's why this is really important. One, the reason this is massively effective for businesses that are doing between $1 and $10 million a year is that you've usually got some sort of lead generation system that's already been working to get you to that level, which means you've got consistent new lead flow and consistent new sales and customers that are already coming into your business. Now, by adding in an extra daily email into this process, not only are we making that relationship with these prospects stronger, but we're increasing the consistency of the messaging that they're going to see from you. And we're also increasing the likelihood of clicks actually coming through. And if you want to have some average numbers to think about for a second, if you have an email list of, say, 10,000 people, and usually when I'm speaking to businesses in this range, they've got anywhere in the range of 10 to maybe 100,000 people on their email list. Well, a really good rule of thumb here is that you should be earning somewhere between $1 and $3 per subscriber per month from your email list. So if you've got 10,000 people on your email list and you're only making $3,000 a month from the list directly, there's a really good chance that you're under optimized. That's only 30 cents per subscriber per month. So what we want to do is we want to take a look at how we can improve the amount of sales coming through email. Now, what's really interesting about this is that you can actually reverse engineer pretty easily how many extra calls you can add to your business. We call this the email lost revenue calculation. And if you want, I've got an email lost revenue calculator that I'll put down in the link as well that you guys can benefit from. Put your numbers in and it'll tell you exactly how much money you're missing out on. Now, what's really powerful about this is that just look at the last email you sent, right? And look at the amount of clicks that it generated. Now, the average click-through rate for an email is about 0.3 to 1%. And so, for example, if you're sending 10,000 emails and you get a 1% click-through rate, that means that every time you send an email, you get 100 clicks. Now, if you've got a competent conversion mechanism, a booked call funnel that converts at least 5 to 10%, then you know 100 clicks is going to turn into 5 to 10 sales calls. And so if you send one email a week, you're going to book about 5 to 10 sales calls a week. That's about an extra 20 to 40 a month. But if you send it Monday through Friday, well, that's 22 extra days a month that you're sending emails. That's 2,200 clicks a month, which is actually going to equate to around about 200 booked calls or 100 booked calls if you have a 5% conversion rate. Holy shit. 100 to 200 extra sales calls. What would that do to your business, right? And if you actually email every day in that example, right, 100 clicks an email and you send an email 31 days in the month, that's 3,100 clicks. And again, that is just based on an average result, right, of like a 1% click-through rate. Even if it was a tenth of that, right, you were only getting a 0.1% click-through rate, which is abysmal. In that scenario, emailing every day, you're still going to add an extra 30 sales calls a month. What's that going to be? An extra 5 to 6 closed deals, probably an extra 50 to 60,000. And that's where you're going to get up to those $5 to $6 to $10 per subscriber per month in terms of your earnings. And we regularly see clients that jump in here that start emailing daily by using both the email marketing process that we have, the daily marketing matrix, and on top of that, we actually get them to install some different conversion mechanisms for their call funnel that help them to increase the amount of throughput, which leads us into step number 2, the second thing that I would add into $1 million business. But before that, I just want you to know, send more emails. Now, it's really important that you send emails in the right way. You don't want to send emails in the wrong way, because if you send them in the wrong way, you might have really low open rates, you might end up getting flagged for spam, and very quickly, that entire list that you've spent years generating can quickly go down the the toilet. And so this is why we help people with this inside of Media Firestorm. If you're a business owner and you're doing between $500,000 a year all the way up to $10 million a year, and you know that you need to get more earned media, more podcast appearances, and really just more throughput inside of your marketing, then book a call down below and have a chat with us. We have access to our top 1% podcast network when you become a client, getting you booked on high quality shows between 3,000 to 300,000 listeners every single month. On top of that, you get access to a once a month founder bottleneck analysis with me, where every month me, you, and the rest of the people inside of this process are going to really identify what are the biggest metrics that are blocking your success, as well as twice a week calls, access to all of our SOPs and systems, like our back-end conversion systems that we talk about on side of this channel, and also some of these conversion mechanisms that I'm going to talk to you about in a second, like our minimum viable calendar and our daily email matrix that will help you to be successful, plus a lot of access to me inside of the community. So if you want some help inside of Media Firestorm, go click the link down below and let's have a chat and see if we can help you with our team. Now, let's move on to number 2. So step number 1, if you add in emails, it's very possible. If you're only emailing, once a week right now, or even less than that, if we just increase the frequency from once a week to 7 times a week, you're going to see massive increases in overall throughput from your email marketing. And it's not unusual for us to see 3 or 5x increases. We have a client who was making about $15,000 a month from his email list. When we started to install this email matrix, in the first 30 days, he actually increased that sales upwards of $200,000. I mean, I can't even do the math inside of my head, but that was like a 13x increase in the amount of money that they made from that list just by emailing more frequently. So the second thing we want to talk about here is conversion mechanisms. Again, if you're already doing between $1 million and $10 million a year, you probably already have a proven conversion mechanism. If you're doing a call funnel, maybe this is a VSL or a deck sales letter or something along the lines of that. Or similarly, if you don't sell on calls and you sell via a checkout funnel, maybe you've had success with a webinar or some other type of conversion mechanism. Well, one of the first things that we do is add in emails, but one of the second things that we do with all of our clients is we add in a second conversion mechanism. Now, if you're running a call funnel, I'm going to talk specifically in this episode about something that we implement for most of our clients called the minimum viable calendar. Very powerful way to get a lot more throughput of calls. But if you're running a different type of funnel, the same rules apply. We just want to add in a secondary layer of conversions. And just to explain this for a second, what I want you to picture and imagine here is imagine the type of person that you are, right? Maybe as you're listening to this podcast episode right now, you're doing the dishes, you're driving the car, maybe you're like working out, but this is a piece of audio that you're consuming, most likely passively. You're probably not sat down at the computer watching this video as we talk about this. Now, what's really important to understand here is that just like you like to consume different media, podcasts, written articles, and YouTube videos, people also like to buy in different ways. And so some people like to buy through a phone call. Some people like to watch videos before they have a phone call. And some people don't like to do that shit at all, right? And some people like to just buy directly or to reach out and to connect with you in a different way. And so one of the easiest ways that you can see a big increase in your business is just to add in a second conversion mechanism, whether this is adding in a once a month webinar that you do or something like the minimum viable calendar alongside your call funnel. This can be very, very effective. And so let me first explain what this minimum viable calendar is. So if you think about a traditional call funnel, you'll have people coming through, and usually you're going to have them go through some kind of video sales letter. They're going to watch an 8 to a 20-minute video. It's going to be like pre-selling them on what it is that you're all about inside of your business. And then they land on a thank you page, which hopefully you follow in that, thank you page, some of the best practices like having multiple breakout clips and videos from podcast episodes or also videos you've recorded to overcome existing objections or things that they're going to have in the sales process. Lots of testimonials and social proof. Again, more examples with podcasts. If you've not got that on the confirmation page, that's a whole other video. And I'm going to have some content on the YouTube channel where we break down one of these funnels in a lot more detail. But long story short, you've got a conversion mechanism that's already working. Now, what we tend to add in immediately for most people is a more direct solution, and we call these minimum viable calendars. And these work especially well in email, as well as putting them in other forms of your funnels, whether it's on YouTube descriptions or in your podcast episodes. And so a minimum viable calendar is essentially a very straightforward calendar booking page where instead of doing a lot of selling on the front end, like you do with the VSL, you do most of your selling selling on the back end. And so on a minimum viable calendar, you'll send people through to a Calendly page. You'll have a very clear headline, very clear description talking about what the call is, what we call we will bullets, which tell them we will do this when you become a client. You're really talking about the future earned benefits. And then on the back end, once they book in for the call, that's where we do all the selling. We have a lot of super deep videos that go into that page. We have a lot of very intense pre-sale emails that go out before the meeting itself. And basically, you're moving the sales process from the front end to the back end. And when we do this, we actually see a massive increase in the amount of calls that we book. So typically for a minimum viable calendar, rather than the 3 to 5% typical throughput that you see from a video sales letter, we typically see 10 to 20% throughput for these minimum viable calendars. And so, first of all, if you're using a VSL that gets you a 5% booking rate or even a 3% booking rate, if we just start emailing with a minimum viable calendar, getting to average of a 10% throughput is absolutely child's work. It's so incredibly easy because we're lowering the friction in the sales process. Now, as we lower the friction in the sales process, we are naturally going to have people that book this call who do end up canceling off the calendar. But even in our minimum viable calendar, where the very first thing they see is we book them into a call, and then on the next page, the first video tells them the price, and it says, here's how much this is, and here's what it includes, which is obviously very jarring for some people because they book a call and then they find out up front, oh shit, this is more money that I can spend. In our funnel, where we're very aggressive, we actually only have a cancellation rate of about 25%. So you can do that simple math. If you get 3 times as many bookings, a 300% increase in throughput, but then 30% of people end up canceling, you can see that that's still a massive net positive. Usually you're going to have twice as many actual calls coming through, sometimes even 3 times as many calls coming through, which is very, very effective. So again, big thing here is that by getting more calls on the calendar and having more conversations and selling in the back end rather than the front end, we're still able to maintain a high close rate inside of the sales process, but we get more customers coming through. And so by having a secondary conversion mechanism, you've got somewhere you can send people who need more selling up front, and you've got somewhere you can send people who are just ready to go through right out of the gate. So that's the second thing we add in, a second conversion mechanism, specifically a minimum viable calendar. There's actually a video on my YouTube channel, I'll link it down below in the description, where we break down a minimum viable calendar in detail so you can understand exactly what I'm talking about with this. Now, the third thing that we add in that really helps businesses to scale is something that we call the shadow funnel. And so, first of all, what I want to help you guys understand is what is a shadow funnel in the first place. Now, in the modern day, AI is absolutely taking over people's brains. It pisses me off to no untold amount how stupid people are getting. And I can't articulate this hard enough. I had a guy the other day who booked in for a call, and then about 5 minutes later, he canceled the call and he sent me an email saying, hey, I just ran your business through ChatGPT and asked it a bunch of questions. It's definitely not a fit for me. And based off what ChatGPT said, I can't find any public reviews here or any notes here. So I'm going to skip out on it this time. Now, even in the modern day, where we want to put as much information into ChatGPT and get these LLMs to understand who we are as businesses, that seems absolutely ludicrous, right? This person, rather than getting the information firsthand from the business, is just using ChatGPT to think for him. Bearing in mind that ChatGPT is still a relatively new technology and most businesses haven't figured out yet how to do ChatGPT and LLM optimization. Most of us didn't even know this was a thing until a few months ago when we started finding customers canceling left, right, and center because of things that ChatGPT or Google's AI was now saying about our businesses. And so this has now become massively important. Around 2 years ago, we were talking about the shadow funnel and it still had a level of importance. And really the shadow funnel is to do with how customers do their due diligence, what they find when they search for you. But this has now become code fucking red, number one important thing that we're getting our clients to implement because of the fact that LLMs like the Google search and ChatGPT are talking shit about you behind your back. And to be clear, when I went and I looked at this person's search that they did, some of the information that was being pulled into ChatGPT and also Google's search AI was just straight up not from us. There was a review from somebody else's podcast. There was a Facebook post about some kind of scam thing that people were doing where they were logging into an ads manager for an interview and taking people's money. A bunch of the shit was just like not even related to us. It was like completely different things. Yet the AI used that source of information to create a narrative about our business that actually has got no semblance of truth to it at all. But you can see why a prospect coming in would be maybe wary, because if they're coming in and they're just kind of curious and they read even a smidge of information that's inaccurate or false or scary looking, they're just going to toss it right out and they're not going to show up to that call. And so this now is probably the third and most important thing we're doing, which is making sure we have consistent messaging through the shadow funnel. And so specifically, this comes in 4 main areas. This comes in LLM optimization, making sure that all the language learning models, you understand how they pull information in. And in a way, we're really trying to game the system. We're trying to make sure that information that's not relevant to us stays out, information that is relevant to us goes in, and that we're feeding those LLMs with a source of information that is absolutely true and relevant and important. And this is why podcasting is such an important part of this process, because when you have a podcast episode go out, not only is it going out on the trusted mediums like Spotify and Apple and YouTube, but those podcast episodes are also typically being shared onto the podcasters' websites, which a lot of the time have a lot of credibility too. And so this becomes a source of information for these AIs to read from that it actually rates very, very highly. I've seen it in a couple of client search results that podcast indexing is actually ranking even higher than things like Reddit posts, which currently seem to have the biggest weight with language learning models, as well as other things like Medium articles as well. And so anyway, podcasting is really powerful in terms of helping it. So I digress. Back to my point. When it comes to consistent messaging through the shadow funnel, we really focus on 4 things. 1, LMM optimization, language learning models, ChatGPT, Grok, Claude, Google's AI, Gemini, all of these things we want to optimize for by putting out content that's going to actually feed that algorithm with interesting and relevant information for your business. 2, we also want to make sure in that LM optimization, there's not false information that's being spread, and you find ways to remove or to disassociate that information. For example, there was a guy who had done a Facebook post that was coming up in our search result. I reached out to him. I was like, hey man, can you just change this post because it's actually coming up in my business's search result and it's got nothing to do with my business and you used need a guest in it. Could you just change that piece of that post to not say need a guest so that it's not coming up in my search result? He was like, yeah man, no worries. He was very happy to help. The second thing is making sure that we have consistent podcast appearances, because the more podcast appearances we have, the shadow funnel is what people find when they search for you. So as your prospects are going through their due diligence process, when they're coming onto a sales call, or sometimes even before they book a call in for the first place, what can they find when it comes to your message? We talked about this before in a previous episode where I talked about $10 million a year entrepreneurs don't make this podcasting mistake. They talk about different things on these podcast episodes. They don't just have one rags to riches story that they tell on every single episode. And this is really important for your podcast appearances, because that means you're going to get different content that indexes for different reasons. And you really want people who are doing their due diligence to be able to find content and find messages from you that repeat the core message that you're selling. So for example, what got you to 0 to $1 million was having good messaging, a single solution that you typically bring to a single avatar. Well, whatever that message was with how you help people, you need to make sure that that message is now consistently across the internet. And this points in to number 3 and number 4 that we talk about in making sure we have consistent messaging through the shadow funnel. And it's actually repurposing podcast episodes and content to multiple mediums. So we'll typically take podcast appearances that we do on other shows and we'll repurpose it onto our own YouTube channel so people can find it. We'll also typically take that YouTube episode or podcast episode that we've done and we'll turn it into a blog post, or sometimes into highlighted clips that we'll put on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on other places. And so really important is that as you're going from $1 to $10 million a year, there are a lot of these people inside of this process who've transacted with you because they're very high-risk individuals. They heard one message, it resonated with them, they booked a call, and they were a one-call close. There are a lot of other people inside of your funnels who are still risky individuals, but they need to see that message in multiple places in order for them to transact. They maybe need to see other people talking about it. They need to be able to hear in repeated ways in which you're actually able to help people. So if somebody Googles you and what they find is not a ton of podcast episodes or YouTube content, or your website and your YouTube and your podcast episodes all echoing the same message of how you help people, they get confused, and that lack of congruency causes them to not want to transact. So these are 3 things that we typically add into businesses that are doing $1 million a year. And a lot of the time, this creates not just only instant growth, but a really strong and stable foundation. We call these stabilizing marketing systems. It's free content. It doesn't cost you money like advertising or cold outbound, that actually gives you a lot more stability and profitability in the business, which then enables you to scale your marketing efforts significantly more effectively. If this made sense to you and you want help installing these 3 things for your business, please feel free to go down into the description, find Media Firestorm in the link, and we can have a chat and see if this makes sense helping you. Hope this was valuable. See you in the next episode, and subscribe to the show if you're liking it. See you on the next one.